Welcome back to Shop Talk number 7, I think. We're losing count. Today we have a really special guest, somebody whose work I've admired for many years, Michael Kennedy of Indian Hill Guitars, soon to be Michael Kennedy Guitars. Really looking forward to this talk and sharing this talk with you. We really like Mike as a guy and as a guitar maker.
Yeah. It's going to be good.
Yeah. So
some of the things to look forward to, we're going to be talking about neck adjustments, adjustable necks, voicing. What else was
Pin versus pinless bridges.
Yeah, pin versus pinless bridges. Permaculture.
Yeah.
It should have all these things in there. Oh, and cooperative sort of building and advantages. And, yeah. So
hope you enjoy.
Without further ado, here's Mike.
I guess the first question is sort of the introductory question of how you got into guitar making and who your influences are, either in lutherie or musically. Yeah, what?
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, it all kind of started so I had just finished university and moved out to California, like to Santa Cruz. Kind of totally unsure what I wanted to do. And I had done my undergrad in mechanical engineering and was kind of disillusioned with it towards the end of like the rigidity of it all and kind of the complete, they didn't focus on creativity at all. It was all just like the mechanics of it. So yeah, I moved out to California and I started to play guitar quite a bit more. I just started at the end of university. And so then when I went out there, I was like, living in a garage, 3 blocks from the water, started surfing, playing a lot of guitar, that kind of thing.
Nice.
And so there were a bunch of things that happened, like, because I kind of started on electric guitar, but then I heard Leo Kottke CD, like a live show of his, that just kind of blew me away. And I was like, what is this, like acoustic guitar? Like, how can it be played like that? And that kind of started to pull me towards acoustic guitar. And then once in California, I like kind of found out about bluegrass music, like that hadn't been a part of my life. And so like Doc Watson and in particular, and acoustic guitar kind of just really started to take over my as far as like my interest.
Right.
Yeah. So, I ended up buying a Laravel after a couple of years. That was kind of like my first like nice, upgrade, like nice guitar.
Yeah.
I was playing a ton, still trying to figure out what to do with my life. Like I was working in like bakeries and substitute teaching and all sorts of random things. And I ended up having for 3 summers, I had a summer job up in the mountains outside of Lake Tahoe at this like small, very rustic, like resort and cabins basically in the woods.
Nice.
Anyway, so I'd spend my summers up there, play lots of guitar, but up in the mountains, there was nowhere to spend money. So like I ended up saving money and just kind of end of one of the summers, I was like, oh, maybe I should like try and build a guitar, and like kind of started thinking about it. And I had met some people in Santa Cruz who worked at the Santa Cruz Guitar Company, and met some other people that built guitars. And I was kind of like, whoa, you can do that. And so at the end of this one summer, I had some money saved up with then nothing after because there was a seasonal job, so it was ending. Basically went online, searched for guitar making courses, and came across Sergey's course, was one of them. And I was like, oh, vegetarian meals, sweet. I'm vegetarian. I don't have to worry about what I do, like not having any clue at all about luthier world, any concept at all. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. And then it was like that November, I drove out to Sergey's with everything in my car. Did that first course. I think that one was 5 weeks. Totally loved it. Went back essentially a year later to do the course again, just to like see, like, is this for me? Like, do I really want to start to, before I start dedicating and buying tools and this and that. and then sort of now in my first course with Sergey, he had an apprentice, John Kilpatrick.
Yeah.
So when I went back for my second course, I was like, oh, I wonder if he still has an apprentice or if he's looking for somebody, sort of in the back of my mind, and just thinking about that possibility. And he didn't have an apprentice when I went back. So one night it was just the two of us in the shop, just Sergey and I, and sort of at Yoshia's urging, behind the scenes that I didn't know. She was like, "Oh, you should ask this guy to apprentice," And so Sergey and I was, "Oh, what are you doing after the course?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm not sure," and blah blah blah. And then it ended up like, I guess it was probably a month after that, I came back up to his place.
Nice.
And he had also then, so in between my two courses with Sergey, Jeremy Clark, who I started the co-op with, he took two courses in between mine.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so Sergey had asked him to come back and apprentice. And then when I was back there, like Yoshia basically thought, oh, this would be a good fit if these guys were both here. And so it was the first time I think that Sergey had ever had like two apprentices at once.
Yeah.
So I went back up there just after New Year in 2006, I guess it was.
Wow.
Yeah. And was there for about 3 years.
Nice. Wow.
So, I mean, as far as the guitar world, Sergey is obviously above and beyond, like by far my biggest influence in how I build and my approach. And and that's kind of how it all just, lots of little things in my life, lots of little bumps, meeting a person here, person there, and like kind of things that just.
And now you're in a workshop with Jeremy, and how many members? 8?
So there's 10 of us total.
Yeah. Okay. So, but it seems like you and Jeremy have like kind of stuck together since working with Sergey. Eh?
Yes.
I feel like you two have a really neat. I don't know if it's I guess a
relationship.
Yeah, like a building relationship in the guitar making. I feel like I guess this is just my interpretation, but
from an outsider's view,
it looks like you two are really pushing each other and helping each other think outside the box, which is really cool, I think.
It's an interesting, like, sometimes when I step back and think about it, like, so Jeremy and I, we literally at Sergey's, we were in bunk beds together. In the warmer months, we shared a tent outside, and like, and then we moved to Montreal and shared an apartment, and like, so we literally lived in the same room for like 5 years.
Wow. Yeah.
And then we've shared a shop for 15 years or whatever it is.
Wow. Yeah.
So I think we have a good, we can balance each other out, maybe isn't the right word. Symbiotic. I don't know. It's like we both really like to figure things out. And Jeremy likes to do that a lot through experimentation. And, like learning about the chemical makeup of this color and how you extract this and what blah, 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 and all that.
Yeah.
I'm not as into the technical side of things, but I really like figuring out how things work and how to do things. And so it's like, we're constantly talking and bouncing ideas off each other. Nice. And it's funny sometimes because like if I step back and think about even just how our interactions are going, like, it's one of those things where we like, he says a sentence and like somebody else may be like, what is he even talking about? This is like random words that came out of nowhere. But I'm like, well, I know what he's talking about. Like, dude, and like, and so we like can communicate where other people might be like, what are they even talking about? Like, if they're not making coherent thoughts or connecting their sentences, but it's like, we've kind of been working next to each other long enough that kind of know like what he's thinking or what each other are thinking and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's neat.
Yeah, that is cool. Speaking of which, what is it like being a part of the Mile End Co-op? Like, well, you're also a founder of it. Any advantages, disadvantages you find? I guess you haven't spent too much time in your own shop anyway. So maybe you
No.
don't know the disadvantages.
Yeah, I've only ever worked in a shop with lots of people.
Yeah.
The smallest shop I worked in was whatever it was, 3 or 4 months when it was just Jeremy and I before Dion came.
Okay.
And even then, we still had people coming over and visiting when we were working, so it wasn't like we were often just alone. So I've only, and Sergey, for people listening who don't know, like he teaches courses and oftentimes has apprentices and stuff. So, and just friends visiting. So, I mean, his shop, there's oftentimes, 6 to 10 people there, and then another 10 people that are just staying at his place. And, so that's mostly what I've known. I mean, for me, there's lots of advantages in that type of group setting. One, just the like social stimulation, right?
Yeah.
There's more people to joke around with. There's just more like camaraderie and just, that just social aspect is great. There's like the more like, like economy of scale, like certainly helps, right? Like if we're, if we want to buy an order of bracing stock or whatever, we can buy a whole lot more and get a discounted price, because we're buying as a large group, or paying for electricity or new machines. Like that has been a big advantage. A couple of years ago, we got a grant to basically upgrade all of our machines in our machine room. Nice. And so it's like now I have access to machines that I would never be able to afford on my own.
Yeah. That's amazing.
So that is just like a wonderful advantage. So there's all those financial sides. And then also like, for, say for like the younger guys in the co-op, Jeremy and I and Nick and Lenny and some of the other guys have, a lot more years of experience. So for the younger guys, we are more than happy to help them and teach them and answer their questions and help them figure things out. And like, I just kind of love, I coming up, starting in Sergey's shop where he has the courses, I was doing that from the get-go, right? Helping students. So, so for the younger guys, there's a big advantage. And then similarly, like, one of the guys, Oliver, who's Quinn Guitars, he's really good with electronics, right? So it's like, oh, we need somebody to wire up this humidity control thing so we can just hook it to our dehumidifier. I'll do that, like, and like, if there's a question about that, ask Oliver, something like that. Or I don't know, like Lenny Daddy Mojo Guitars, he initially was a painter, like fine art. So it's like, oh, I have a question about color. Oh, I can ask Lenny, like, how does this work, or blah blah blah. So that type of knowledge sharing as well, not necessarily strictly related to guitars, but then like extended through anything in running a shop or whatever, is definitely another big advantage. Disadvantage, I don't know. I mean, it's again, like I've only worked in a shop like this. So, at times it can be busy and you're like, oh, I really need to use the shaper table or the bandsaw, somebody's on it, and but I don't know, I'm so used to it that it's just like, well, I just always do something else. I can always find something else to do. It's like a temporary inconvenience, but
it seems to me like the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages, like and I'm sure you can
I think so.
That's really neat.
Also, being a teacher, I agree, like teaching and helping other people figure stuff out sometimes can be the best way to learn even yourself. Why did I do my neck that way, or why did I do whatever, and now you explain it, you're like, maybe I should change that. My questions have inspired Zach to change something anyway. Speaking of which, like, what are your days now looking like? How busy can your shop be? What are your, how do you spend in your days now with the the pandemic, or just in general?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's been such a strange year. I mean, it's pretty much like I'm home or in the shop. You know, most of my time that I've been in Montreal, I've been a pretty, like, I'll stay up quite late. Like, you know, I would go to bed at like 2 and wake up at 9 or 10, especially because I was, you know, playing gigs or going to shows, or just like, you know, I host this weekly bluegrass old time jam downtown that goes until 3 in the morning, right? So it's like, if I'm going to do that every week, I'm either going to just totally have my schedule thrown off one night and then switch back, or I just shift everything a little bit later.
Right.
So over the past year, that's kind of all disappeared, right? Because we're not doing shows and gigs and big jams. And so now it's pretty much like, I usually head into the shop actually still around like noon, but then we'll stay until 8, 9, something like that. It's nice that we're getting to be, you know, a couple weeks ago started to be over freezing a little bit more. So I've been running a lot. That's kind of what I do in the warmer months. I really love to run. So it's mostly just, home in the shop. I haven't been playing guitar as much as I feel like I should have, but I think that's been a common occurrence for a lot of people from what I've heard over the pandemic, just like a weird lack of inspiration. I think because I'm not playing with people enough. Something like that.
And now, do you find like how's your balance with like working on guitars and then having to do like business stuff, like, well, selling guitars or the co-op running or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, actually, thinking about it, that's another big advantage of the co-op, with sort of the idea that, okay, if there's 10 of us, if we all do 10% of the work required to run a shop, you only have to put in 10% of the work. And you know, if everybody puts in just a little bit more, then it's like, the shop can continually improve. So on that side of thing, as far as just like kind of administrative shop maintenance, running things, that's easy enough to balance. Now it's always like, I mean, there still is always stuff to do, right? Like on last Friday, we each kind of get assigned in teams. We work in pairs. We get assigned a machine that over a year, like every, like either solstice or equinox or close to, we do a really in-depth maintenance of the machine.
Nice.
So like last Friday, I'm on the bandsaw, so I had to spend a couple of hours taking off the old tires and installing new tires, which I'd never done before, which was really,
it's annoying.
I was like, how is this thing? It actually took 3 of us to like eventually try these things on, and like I'd heated them up and I was just like, how is this possibly going to work? But they went on. So there's always still stuff like that, right? Like, even though it's working in a big co-op, you still, you know, and like this week, what was I doing? I'm going to put up some we just got a drum kit in the shop. So now we have some guitars and a bass sitting out by it as well, and some amps. So I'm going to make some hangers to hang stuff up on the wall.
Nice.
Right? So there's always little things like that. And then as far as like the other side, usually I just kind of take in the mornings, once I have my coffee and whatnot, you know, I'll do emails if I need to, and do my books and all that kind of stuff in the mornings. It's definitely, and the selling side is like, I think for a lot of people, it's the same. It's by far the part, like, I hate it. I hate it more than anything. And I'm not particularly good at it, unfortunately, but you know, it's then you have to do it if you want to.
Right. Yeah. We kind of wish that the buyers would be better at doing their job, actually.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. We could do less selling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we get more into the nitty gritty?
Sure.
I wanted to ask you about neck joints. I know like there's a bunch of different neck joints happening in the Mile End shop. What's your approach and your thoughts around them, and well, like adjustable, non-adjustable? What are your opinions?
Yeah. So, I mean, initially I was doing dovetail with glued fingerboard extension and a bolt like Sergey teaches.
Yeah.
And that works great. Eventually, after a year or two on my own, I was doing an elevated neck, and I was like, well, I'm just going to do this entirely bolt-on. So that was kind of the first fully bolt-on neck. And I was like, well, this is amazing. There's like intense satisfaction. I mean, every time, but like the first time, especially when I like bolted the neck on and I was like, okay, all the bolts fit. And then I like paused and I'm like, oh, like
you're done.
That's it. The neck's on. Like, like the neck, I don't have to like glue and freak out about that and scrape this way and like worry about things going wrong. I was just like, oh, that's it. It's done. And oh, wait, the angle's wrong. I mean, this didn't happen, but like, it's like, oh, I can just like undo it,
right, yeah.
sand it. And now look, now it's good. And so it's like, okay, forget it. That's the way to go.
Yeah.
So for a while I did, every time I've done an elevated neck, it was always bolt on. And then it was a few years after that, maybe a good bit, maybe like, I can't even remember now, 6 years that I started doing for like a non-elevated, doing a fully bolt on with like, the same kind of, I don't even know who's the originator. It's probably old. I know Taylor does sort of something similar to that recessed thing. That system. So that's my main way of attaching to this day.
Right.
Now, adjustable necks. I did an adjustable neck recently that seems to be working out great. Like it was for one of my F-hole guitars, and the action, hasn't moved. Like it doesn't change. I don't know what it would take. It'd be really bad if it did, because something would have to probably go really wrong for it to change. Right. So I don't know. I'm not entirely sure. Like it certainly makes a ton of sense, right? To be able to just like instantly change the action.
Yeah.
Seasonally and stuff, I haven't done enough, because I did like maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 back at Sergey's. I did one for my own steel string right when it was first or second guitar once I was on my own. And then I just did one last year for the first time in 10 years or 12 years, whatever it was. So I'm still kind of like, maybe adjustable. Honestly, one of the hesitations is just like if you want to do like a nice, like curved heel, it becomes a major pain.
Right.
And to try and get it to look nice and have like an even gap, because you need a gap because it has to move.
Yeah.
So on this one that I did just like kind of a straight tapered, like a ice cream cone heel. And it works great and it looks nice and that's cool, but you still have like a bolt, like you need to have an access to put an Allen key for this method of that we tend to do in the shop. Which, is another thing where I'm like, I'd rather not have a hole there.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm still not entirely, I'm sure I'll do more. I'm not going to like switch and just do those or anything.
Yeah. Right.
Now, one fun thing that I've done over the past long time, but when Nick Island Instruments, every once in a while he builds an acoustic.
Oh, okay.
So I'll like help him out with some of it, because he's primarily by far an electric builder. So when he gets an acoustic order, we'll work together a little bit, and I'll help him out with some stuff. And so one of the things that we've done is we've come up with some totally different type of adjustable neck systems. And he is not afraid to take like wild chances. Like,
oh yeah.
Like,
wow.
So we're doing one now. How can I describe this? Okay, so the guitar, it's a double O, acoustic, obviously. So double O, headless, F holes, adjustable neck. Is this one a fan fret? Might be, and it's got pickup like mounted into the top and like hardware in the top, and
Wow.
like and no heel on the neck.
Oh yeah.
Like it's just like wild
Wow.
guitar. And so that's been with his builds. It's kind of like, okay, well, because he really doesn't want to. He doesn't like to have a heel.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Okay.
Coming from the electric world.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like that's a challenge. Like, okay, how do we do this? And we did a couple guitars that was pretty cool, where we basically like set the neck and the like fingerboard extension. We had routed out a deep cavity for it, set that in, and then we had this steel shaft that was actually like you could bolt on either end that went through the neck inside the guitar. So it's basically like a locked pivot in the actual body.
Okay.
And then there were some bolts that, in this case, you accessed from the fingerboard.
Okay.
Which I like, because like a black hole on a fingerboard is pretty hard to see, especially up in like the 15th fret, area, like a 16th fret. And so that was cool. That was pretty fun to mess around with. And now we have another one where similarly in the body, there's a big cavity routed out. And then there's going to be a pivot, but it's this is the top of the guitar, and then it's like routed out. There's a pivot here so that like the neck pushes up against it like that. So actually that if the fingerboard comes in the neck, there's actually like a little like cut out at that end of the neck, right? And locks onto the pivot.
Oh yeah.
So it's just like sort of the string tension is pulling it against that pivot.
Right.
And then now we have next to it, we have like a barrel nut, again, inside the neck. So then there's going to be a bolt that comes up into that barrel nut. So that's going to be what pushes it up and down, but it's pivoting on the.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like totally, it's like, let's just try it. Let's see if it works.
Yeah.
And I think it'll work. Like it should work. But so that's kind of another fun thing about the shop too, is getting to like, people try lots of different ways of doing these things, right? And so you can see like, there have probably been, I'm going to say 6 or 7 different types of adjustable necks done in the shop.
Wow. Yeah.
And you can say like, okay, well, that one didn't really work so well. Actually, maybe even more, but yeah.
Or you could, the other way to look at it is you can have less catastrophes because you have people that run it by before.
100%. Yeah. And like, yeah, because I mean, maybe I'll have like, in my head, I'm like, what a brilliant idea. And then it's like, oh, well, so, explaining to somebody and it's like, well, you're gonna have to cut through the back of your guitar to do that. And it's like, oh, right. Like, didn't think of that. So that's another huge, you preventing myself or other people in the shop from going down paths that are, not going to end well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay. Here I have another question that's this one I'm trying to ask every guitar maker because I feel like it's a good one and it means something different to everybody. But what does voicing mean to you when you're building?
Yeah, that is an interesting question, because it's like, so I mean, there's always the joke that we have where it's like, we always tell like, if I have some sort of student or one of the younger guys in the shop, and they brace the top, it's like, okay, well, make sure you hold it up and look real serious and tap it, because that's what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to be like, I understand this wood now, we're tuned, we're as one. So there's, I think there's this idea that there's some magic in voicing. And with certain woods and whatever. And I don't know, I tend to shy away from that a little bit.
Yeah, me too.
I think a lot of it, I mean, there is, I don't know, it's sort of like, a lot of it can be broken down objectively, through like say Chladni testing,
Mhm.
things like that, at least to see the way that the top is moving, in certain modes or whatever. So for me, the idea when people talk about voicing, essentially, I think of it as trying to balance everything out in a logical like way. So, like say for example, okay, like a lattice pattern is very even. But the top that you're gluing the lattice to is not even, right? There's a long grain and then there's cross grain, which are different. So if you glue an even thing onto something that's uneven, it's still going to remain uneven, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe the lattice, then you should angle it or twist it or skew it so it's more cross grain or whatever, to counteract that. And then, but in front of the bridge, it's going to be pushing down, and back here, it's going to be pulling up, so that maybe it shouldn't. So maybe you should shift some of the stiffness up here and reduce some of it back here. And so for me, voicing is really trying to think about all of those things and take those things into consideration. And then, I mean, as much as I like to make fun of it, I still all the time hold things up and tap them because I love it, because it's fun and it sounds good, and it like, and not to say that you can't hear anything, because you definitely can. Like at some point, it's like, oh, now this thing is coming alive, or like, or oh yeah, it's kind of dead down here, and now it's really like everywhere, it's ringing. And but I more use like that, like tapping kind of as just like personal satisfaction, and it's kind of fun. I don't necessarily, to a certain extent, I'm not like, oh, there's a half tone difference there, so I need to take that brace down there. I don't approach it like that, like some people do. I'm more just like, oh, now the whole thing is sounding good and really coming alive. Or like, and sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe it does sound like, oh, it's a little bit tight here where these couple braces are meeting or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I guess if I had to summarize, like voicing is really just like, for me, there are certain like parameters or guidelines that I follow and try and help me funnel down into a point where I'm like, okay, yeah, this top is quote unquote voiced and ready to go. And it's a combination of things. It's doing that tapping, being like, oh yeah, now it's really alive. It's doing the Chladni test, seeing how the lines are moving, stuff like that. It's doing deflection tests, seeing, okay, it's about where I like it, and this, and so it's a bunch of different kind of things that, and just having done it for a long time. Intuition. Eventually I'm like, yeah, these braces all look like a good height. That seems about where I like it. And now it's done. Yeah.
Cool. Speaking of which, like, what is it that you're shooting for? What would you say your parameters are? Like, what are you looking for a good sounding guitar to you?
I mean, primarily it's like, so like when I'm carving braces and stuff, I try and get, like, say, the ring and a half closed, right? I try and get everything like that good, but I don't freak out if it doesn't close. Right. That's like one of the parameters or guideline where I'm like, it's just helping move me in the right direction for where I want. But it's not something that like, it's like, oh, I didn't get this one closed, it's not going to be good. Like, no, I have many examples where that is completely not true. Right. So I'm really just like, I kind of feel like I'm done when I feel like I'm done. There's never like something where it's like, okay, those three things are all, I hit those marks, now I'm done. It's more like I'm like, oh, take a little here, and eventually at some point I'm just like, yep, this is good. I like where this is at.
So you would say there's some intuition in there, like
your
experience, like I know I'm where I'm going to get that sound that I want.
Yeah, definitely.
Because we've had this discussion about intuition versus science, and how really you know, they can hopefully support one another, but sometimes you have to work based on intuition because you don't have the science or whatever.
Yeah. And the intuition side of things, like I sometimes bristle at that a little bit because I think some guitar makers or craftspeople in general maybe push the idea of intuition a little bit to try and make it sound like there's something special.
Right.
Or use it as an excuse, maybe.
Yeah. Or as an excuse. And it's just like, no, and you hear stories of people like, oh, I went to go visit this guitar maker and, he picked up and flexed the top and just knew he was saying, oh yeah, this will be a great double O with and it's like,
yeah,
it's a piece of wood. Like it'll be great, whatever you want. You can make it do whatever. I'm more of the opinion, like, okay, so there was this, TJ Thompson.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was out at the, what do they call it? The Fretboard Summit.
Mm-hmm.
Like they had a couple years ago out in California. So the Fretboard Journal, there was a big gathering. And he gave a talk there. I think it's online. I believe you can listen to it online. And it was like just what I needed to hear at that moment. Because he was, for one, like the talk was supposed to be about like busting myths or something, or like Martin, because like all these people say, oh yeah, if you have a rosewood from 53, it's going to be like this because of that, and like all this craziness, right? So it's supposed to be about busting myths.
Mm-hmm.
But he was like, it was not at all. He was talking, it was very like personal and talking about like what it's like psychologically and emotionally as a guitar builder and how your outside life influences this, and how like all of our lives take these huge swings. And it was really, really, I recommend listening to it if you enjoyed it.
I'll see if I find it, I'll put a link into below. Yeah.
Because so one of the things that he was talking about, he's like, and this is a very Sergey thing as well. He's like, when I go to put a brace, to glue a brace, some people might like analyze the bend, the stiffness, and analyze this and analyze that. He's like, I reach in my box, my bin of braces, and I pull one out, and that's the brace that I'm going to use on this guitar because that's the one that wanted to be used. Right? Like it's just like he's not trying to. One of his things was like he doesn't try and fight the wood because you'll never win. So he just like, it's just like, okay, this is the one that I'm supposed to use on this guitar. Like, and I'm paraphrasing poorly, but like, I like that idea of like, sort of like, okay, these are the materials I have to work with. Let's make them work really well.
Right.
And and it's not to say like, oh, I just ignore the quality of wood or don't pay attention to it at all. It's more like taking these things and making them work, versus like seeking something out, being like, no, I need it to be like this because that's going to make it work for this guitar, as opposed to be like, okay, here's what I'm using and I'm going to make this into an amazing guitar. Right. So I prefer like sort of, and like I was saying, Sergey is very similar. It's like, people say, oh, Sergey, why'd you use that glue instead of that? He's like, well, because this one was sitting here. So that's why, that's why I used the yellow glue, because the zap was all the way over there. So I didn't want to walk over to the other side of the shop. And it's like, yeah, it's joking. He's jokingly saying it, but there is some like, sort of underlying truth to it that like, I'd prefer to, I want to be able to like take these different elements and put them together and, with those limitations, make something as best I can, as opposed to seeking out the perfection in all the different parts and ingredients, and then assuming that, okay, if I put them together in this mechanical process with all those things, that it's going to be great.
Right.
Yeah, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Actually, that leads into this question, I think.
Oh yeah, sure. So what is your opinion on sustainability in guitar making? Like I know I watched that interview with Tom Sands and Joel showed and
Dion,
yeah, and that was really great. But yeah, I thought like you mentioned that you donate money as a guitar maker. You feel like donating money to a tree planting program.
Yeah.
Like how else does sustainability how do you feel like it fits in guitar making? Or
it's a really good question, because when I was very first thought about getting into it, make a list in my head of pros and cons of doing this type of work, and I'm like, well, there aren't very many cons, right?
Mhm.
There's some materials you use a lot, whether it be like I use more tape than probably 99% of the population in the world,
Right.
or glue or whatever, but then the biggest one obviously is the wood, and using these exotic woods. There's some real questions there about shouldn't you, and my feeling was like, okay, like the amount of wood that I'm going to use over the course of my career is pretty darn small, right? That's not to say it can be ignored though. And more honestly, the bigger thing even than the actual wood probably is just the shipping of the wood, right? And the processing of it, like having a thing on a big boat and then a plane to get to me, that's not great. So my original thought was, yeah, okay, well, I don't want to just try and get like a zero sum and like just negate what I use.
Mm-hmm.
So, if I, over the course of my career, add up all the wood I use and it's like one spruce tree or so, you know what I mean? Like the one size of one tree or something. It's like, well, if I can, help plant more trees, and it's like, whatever, it's like 25 cents and you plant a dozen trees or something, not quite that, but like, it's like, and so just trying to be like, okay, well, I can not just try and negate it, but maybe push it in a better direction. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely, the sustainability is definitely an issue, but I think for most small builders, I think being conscious of it, and maybe doing something in whatever way, to try and balance it out, or ideally push it in a more positive direction, is a really good thing. I mean, like, I know, Zach, you've harvested a lot of your own wood, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And like that type of thing, if I'd get in big trouble if I went and cut down a tree on the mountain here in Montreal, but that would be something I would love to do, to live somewhere where I could have that type of thing as well. That would be kind of, the ideal.
Yeah, knowing where your wood comes from is a big thing with Zach, I think.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different ways I think that's a good question, because there are so many different ways to look at it. Like sustainability is kind of like voicing, you can approach it from a few different angles, and there's more than one route forward, really.
I do find as well, like, there are little things that, like, actually, this would be a disadvantage of the co-op, where like sometimes, like, somebody's working on a machine and the dust collector's running, and they're stopping for a minute and they're measuring something and doing, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, why is the dust collector still running? You're not, like, turn it off. Like, there have been a couple like things where in my head, I'm always thinking like, oh, like, do it for Greta, turn off the machine. You're not using it. Turn off that light and you're not using it. Like, and sometimes I push it too far. Like I mean, maybe not too far, but
maybe not far enough.
Maybe not far enough. Yeah. I have like, like, I don't like to throw things out. Like, so like my sandpaper, I use it as on my big block, but then, the edges are still good. So then I have that, and then I tear that. No, then I have sandpaper in my drawer, like some little bits that are probably like 8 years old. Like, I'm just like, oh, but I still might use that little bit, you know?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, maybe you do take it a little too far.
Yeah, there are some things, yeah.
I'm with you on that though. I'm the same way, but he's teaching me to sometimes you hold on to everything.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Speaking of fun things that you can do, what's exciting you about guitar building these days? Anything that's particularly challenging? Because you've built quite a few over the years. You know, what is it that keeps you excited?
Yeah, so the aesthetic side of things always still keeps me going.
Right.
And so always trying to think of new. I mean, I do repeat things, but like not very often, you know, like I kind of always like to try new things, especially aesthetically. So I don't really see that ever ending because it's kind of limitless, right? Like I've only ever done one real like pictorial inlay with stone, for example, right? Like, and that's like a whole universe that could, you know, you could spend years and years working on. So that side of things is still exciting me. I'm doing on the most recent, so this F-hole guitar I was talking about that has the adjustable neck. One of the guys in my, one of the new members of the shop has started, or he winds pickups.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys are third. He's making me one that I'm gonna put on that guitar because it's got an elevated fingerboard. So I'm gonna put that kind of connected, I think, to the, if I can, I've kind of got a scheme to do it like to the end of the fingerboard. And then with the like a little wheel sticking out underneath the neck as the control right there.
Okay.
So like on the elevation.
Yeah.
So that's going to be, I've never done that before.
Yeah.
Right.
That's cool.
Like a pickup like that. I've never done really I've kind of done an electric guitar. Jeremy and I built one together years ago. But so that's something new that I'm kind of like, oh, this is cool. Like, I got to figure this out. Like, what's going on here? I don't really know anything about electronics or pickups at all. So that's kind of cool. That's going to be a fun. He's getting some more bobbins. I think that's what they're called. Yeah, I don't know. But to wind the pickups. So once those are in, I'll start in on that project.
Nice.
Let's see. Other than that, I don't know. I like honestly, the excitement of building is still kind of there. Like,
yeah,
even for like a regular guitar, like especially those first stages, they're so fun when you're just like, oh, I've got my sides bent. Oh, they're laminated. Now this is done. Boom, boom, boom. And it's like, I still find that kind of thrilling.
Yeah.
And quite fun. There's always new things that I do want to make an electric at some point, like a full-on electric.
Cool.
And just because I'm like, I don't know what that would look like. I'm like, if I make an electric, I have no idea what.
Right.
Is it super modern? Is it super like rustic? Is it like old? I don't know. So that's something that every like maybe 5 or 6 months, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna think of an electric.
Yeah, right.
And then I kind of don't think of anything, and then another 5 or 6 months go by. I'm like, okay, now I'm gonna design an electric. So someday that'll be coming out. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Nice. I had a new question from somebody actually this morning, and I thought it would actually be perfect for you. And it's just he was asking what the difference was between pin bridges and pinless bridges, because I know you do both, right? And I feel like you'd be the perfect. I've never done a pinless bridge. So. Yeah, on a steel string.
I haven't actually done a pinned bridge. Well, we did when we did as the co-op, we built a guitar together a few years ago for our 10th anniversary. And that one had a pinned bridge.
Okay.
But I hadn't done a pin bridge since back at Sergey's.
Okay.
Which, you know, and all of his steel strings were pin bridges. So I've built a bunch of them, but it's been a while.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference, so there's some key the main difference I think comes through in the fact that with a pinned bridge, you need a hardwood bridge plate, right? Or some sort of system for the pins to not just rip through the top, and the ball ends rather. Now with a pinless bridge, I just use a softwood, so I use basically spruce, almost always spruce for my bridge plate. So right there's a huge difference in weight, and stiffness in that area. Is that good? Is that bad? It's different, right? But so it's like, it's hard to say like advantages or disadvantages of pin versus pinless because they're different. So if you're looking for something, if I wanted to build Martin replicas that really had, like, say, an old Martin sound, I should not try and do it with a pinless bridge because they didn't have pinless bridges, right? Yeah. So pinless bridge would be a huge disadvantage if you're going for that type of sound. I don't know. When I came into guitar making, I had very little knowledge about guitars, history of guitars. If you had said pinless bridge, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, right? Like, and I still honestly don't really have that much knowledge about guitars. I've never gotten into like, oh, well, this model from then has this, like, that side of it just really does not interest me at all.
Yeah, but you took a mechanical engineering, you have mechanical engineering background, right?
Yes.
I'm sure it helps like quite a bit, right?
Yeah, it helps in one of the things that's analyzing a problem and understanding the parts of the problem, breaking things down, is very useful. And and what I mean by that too is, like, I look at a top and it's like, okay, well, what are the forces on the top, right? Okay, well, it's this, and trying to like, and kind of breaking that down and drawing these little force diagrams and stuff like that, and like understanding how you can then use that diagram and analyze it or think about it or whatever. So yeah, like with the bridges, there's sort of like, in a way, if you think about with the pinned bridge, right? Once it's all strung up, there's in theory no movement between the ball end and the saddle, the back of the saddle, right? So it's like, okay, well, what if your pinless bridge, instead of the holes being above the top that come in through the back, what if they were on the inside and it just came up just a little bit lower, and then came up through the bridge and went, right? Like, there's not really any difference then between a pinless bridge and a pin bridge. When it comes down to that. So certainly the engineering helps with trying to figure out, say, stuff like that, or think about, okay, what are the key differences here? So that's why it's like pin versus pinless. Yeah, there's some fundamental differences, but sort of at their core, they're the same. But those fundamental differences require different result in the end because you have to have a hardwood bridge plate or softwood or whatever. But the main thing that, so I was gonna say before, like when I started with guitar making, not really knowing the difference between pinned and pinless, I was like, okay, well, if I do a pinless bridge, look at all this room I have to like do something cool on the bridge, right? Because now I don't have to have all these pins. I have like a blank little canvas where I can do something cool. So it was like, okay, I'll do a pinless bridge. And like, that was, so my first course with Sergey, I did 2 guitars and they're both pinned. My second course, I did a pinless steel string and then a classical. So both pinless, well, obviously the classical is pinless. And then just from then on, I never did
Okay.
on my own. Like for Sergey, I built lots of pin bridges,
Yeah.
but that was on my own.
Mm.
I was like, oh, I like pinless bridges. They're cool. They got some advantages, you know. They have advantages and disadvantages. You can change the strings relatively quickly, but there's more risk of maybe damaging because you got to pull it through the hole and it could rattle on the top. And so I don't know. I just kind of went with it, but it wasn't necessarily in pursuit of a particular sound.
Yeah. Do you think what kind of effect do you think it has on the sound? Like, is it noticeable, or is it really other things? So many other things come into play. You really don't.
You know, it's interesting because like there's a sound of like what I would say like quote unquote like modern fingerstyle guitar. That is like, so I gotta be careful on how I describe it. It's like there's maybe a more metallic edge to it, like a sharpness or shininess.
More ring?
More ring, yeah.
Just less supporting lows.
Less supporting lows, yeah. Less like, I feel like my guitars tend to be maybe rounder in the mid and like lower end, whatever that means. I wouldn't classify mine as like a modern fingerstyle sound, right? And that is something that's not a sound I'm looking for, right? Because I find that like it can be a beautiful sound if somebody's doing solo fingerstyle and filling up this whole space with their, 5 fingers or 4 fingers, and like that's amazing. But I like to play with people. I like to sing when I play. And if you get a guitar that has that huge fingerstyle sound,
right?
You're playing with people, it's like, oh man, take it down. Like
Yeah.
we all got to fit in here somehow, right? And like trying to sing over that over a guitar like that can be difficult because again, there's just so much going on.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that has to do with, say, the bridge plate, but I just noticed that if I were to compare, like trying like a core difference between my guitars and a lot of what I hear out there, is that difference where it's like mine tends to be a bit rounder and have a certain quality to it. And one of the main differences between my guitars and a lot of people's is pin versus pinless bridge.
Right.
Maybe that has something to do with it. I mean, really what I'd have to do is, build a couple of guitars with pin bridges and see if I honestly, I'm sure they would still sound like my guitars probably.
Yeah. I would think so too. Yeah.
Let's veer away from guitars a little bit. Well, sort of, but am I right in remembering that you studied permaculture design?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So what's the story behind that, and do you carry some of that influence into your guitar making?
So the permaculture, like, so I had done with my ex, we had done a bunch of traveling, but like gone to some farms and whatever, and done like the woofing, like the help ex type volunteering at farms and stuff.
Cool.
So started to get introduced to the idea of permaculture. And then actually when we were over in Ireland, oddly enough, we were going through Cork. How are you supposed to say it? It's not Cork. Cork, I think it's supposed to say.
Cork? I don't know.
We were in Cork, whatever you want to call it. And I think it's Cork. Okay. But there was a guy giving a permaculture talk, like a weekend. We were like, okay, this is cool. Like we're just, traveling around for a while, like just looking for stuff to do. So we went, and this guy was like an amazing teacher. It's this guy, Warren Brush.
Okay.
And it was funny because he's like, I'm not really a teacher, I'm a storyteller. And we're kind of like, oh, okay, here we go. Like storyteller. Like we came here to learn, like not to hear stories. And then meanwhile, it was like 2 days later, we're like, whoa, like where did this the last, like what just happened? Like, how did that go by so fast? And how did we like learn so much? And like, we were totally blown away by this, this weekend and this guy. And so he has started a community down in Southern California, and that they offer permaculture courses, and it's this huge area up in the kind of high desert. Quail Springs is what it's called. So it was very much of interest to myself and my ex, and like we really enjoyed his teaching style, and it was something we were thinking about, like getting land and doing getting more into it. And for people listening, just I guess like a real quick, like permaculture, is primarily associated with land and food and habitation and systems kind of working together, closing systems and redundancy and regeneration, like regenerative land use, as opposed to sustainable and kind of, but at its core, it's a design philosophy that can apply to anything. But we were probably approaching it from the food perspective and land usage perspective. And so it was an amazing, went down for like the 2-week kind of intensive design course, totally amazing experience, amazing people. And so it's interesting because I hadn't realized before doing the course, but like a lot of the ideas had always kind of been important to me. In the way of like thinking of efficiency, and kind of system thought. So like overall large system thinking, and ways that it applies to building. It's like, it can be simple things like, okay, we're rearranging the dust room. What's the most used tool? Oh, the like belt sander or bandsaw, like those should be closest to the door here, right? Like that's kind of just a very basic like permaculture type thing, right? Where do we want to place the things that we don't use? Let's place all these things here, and like that type of like organizational level thing. But then there's also like the larger systems and process thinking, where it's like, okay, like what's the like bottleneck point that everything has to go through. And so it's like, okay, well, I know that eventually I'm going to have to get to that point and do this job. So what's the way to get there with the least amount of work, to kind of make it put in the minimum amount of effort, not in a bad way, but again, like an efficiency way, to get to that point. Because if I know I'm going to have to be there, then I don't need to like worry about measuring this thing way back here super accurately, because who cares? Because by the time I get there, it's going to be cut away and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So there's definitely like, I would say the permaculture course kind of helped give me a way to just more specifically think about the process. So it's not like a specific thing where it's like, oh, well, I learned this step, which I can then apply to this. Right. It was more just like, okay, in how I live my life and do my work, let's think about the process of it all, and trying to minimize energy input and still get to the same result. And that I think is really useful. Like I see a lot of builders, in my opinion, wasting a lot of time where, somebody makes a jig to really accurately route out the, insert for the bolt-on neck, like on the, and it's like, okay, cool, that's great. Does that measurement actually make any difference if you're a millimeter big, a millimeter short? So like, why take the time to make an accurate jig that you have to route? Oh, and then when you're done routing, you have to clean that up by hand because the router is not going to leave like a nice enough edge. So, oh, if you're gonna have to clean it up by hand, then why not just do it on the bandsaw and then clean it up by hand, right?
Yeah,
like,
right. Yeah.
So I think a lot of times people like just really trying to analyze the process of it all, and think about when accuracy matters and when it doesn't. And a lot of the time it doesn't. I just did a rosette this weekend that's relatively intricate. It's got like all these different parts and different levels and
it's really nice
tags in the thing. Things. I didn't measure stuff for that, right? Like when I'm routing out the thing, I'm like, okay, well, route it. And it's like, oh, it needs to be a little bit bigger. So I just shift my thing and oh, okay, now it fits.
Yeah.
I could have taken 5 minutes and measured and really carefully drawn out with a sharp pencil and tried to get this, or I could just do it and then make it fit, right? Like,
yeah.
So I try and kind of measure as little as possible often. And like, it's like, oh, I want these braces to be 6 mil. Oops, they went through the thickness ender, now they're 5.9. Oh, okay, who cares?
Yeah, right.
I don't. The guitar's not going to care. By the time I clean up and taper the top and the sides and this and that, they're going to end up some random number anyway. So, and so to get back to the original question, like I think that going through the permaculture training just helped me really kind of think about those things some more, or in a slightly different way, and really try and analyze that type of thought process in maximizing efficiency and minimizing energy usage.
Cool. Yeah, I should probably get into that because I can't measure worth anything.
Yeah.
I always measure the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Which is not a good thing either. It gets there in the end.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I guess that's mainly all the questions we had.
We're just wondering if people want to check you out and your work, if they haven't already connected with your work, where would be the best place for them to find?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the usual social media things, Facebook and Instagram.
Okay.
Website is indianhillguitars.com. And then I have a YouTube channel, which I haven't put anything in a little bit, but that's got lots of demos of people playing my guitars. And then in addition, because in the co-op we host concerts. We've hosted dozens of concerts over the years. A lot of videos from those are up as well. So that's kind of cool to check out.
What's the name of that YouTube channel?
I will have to look. It's
all right.
Indian Hill Mic or Indian Hill Guitars, or I'm not sure I can't remember.
Yeah. Okay.
But I'll check that out. Although actually I should note, I'm in the process, I'm going to be changing to just Michael Kennedy guitars.
Okay.
Relatively soon. I was trying to originally, there's an artist that I really like, Peter Nevins. So he does block prints. He used to live in Montreal years ago. And I don't know if you've ever seen because I know, Zach, I know you like Gillian Welch, right? Like have you seen her print where she's on the moon playing the banjo?
Oh yeah.
That's him. Like that's his. And he's done a lot of her stuff over the years. The album they just put out over the pandemic, like he did the cover for that, and
cool.
He's done a lot of it. Anyway, he's great. And so I was originally thinking, oh, I'd love to commission something from him when I switch my name, to just kind of mainly as an excuse to get a print from him.
Yeah.
But timing with him isn't going to work out. So I think that'll happen down the line a little bit. But so in the near future, probably within the next month or so, I'll change the name. Now, in theory, anything linked, all my accounts should, take you to the new name. If there is a name change, it should hopefully all work out.
Yeah.
But just as a heads up that it'll soon be Michael Kennedy Guitars.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great.
Nice.
All right.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Yeah. It was great.
Yeah. Thanks again for asking me. And
yeah, my pleasure.
Great. I've never actually, I like that background. What's the wall? Like, is it like burnt wood or like, what is it?
No,
the behind on the other side, like that's like dark gray. Looks like nice wood. Anyway.
Over here?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
That's flooring.
Yeah. Oh, it's flooring. Nice. Yeah. It looks classy. It's classier than my like beaten up plywood. Yeah.
We went out looking for beadboard or something nice and ended up at a place that had a flooring sale going on. So
flooring on the wall.
Perfect. Yeah.
Right to the wall.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully someday we'll be
able to come and
in person. Eric's never been to the Milan shop, so he's
oh yeah. Yeah, always welcome. Hopefully not too much longer, eh? Like getting kind of sick of this.
No.
Yeah. But
Right.
Cool. Nice to meet you, Mike. I've been an admirer of your guitars for a long time now, actually.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Sure. Great instruments.
Yeah. Well, I've never played one, but I'm sure they sound as good as they look, then it'd be awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
And it's interesting because like I really like the hand rubbed Sunburst, and I noticed lots of hand rubbed stuff as well. And aesthetic that I like about what you do. So it's been
good. Yeah, I love those hand rub bursts, man. They're so like they just the first one I did, I walked in the shop like the next day, and my bench is on the far side of the shop when you walk in, and I saw it hanging on the bench, and I was like, that's a guitar. I was like, that's like in my head, like the idealized, like idealized guitar.
I'm with you. That's what I think too. I love it. So cool.
Cool.
All right.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. And sure we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks again for asking, and nice chatting with you guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
See you later.
See you later. Take care.